This is One-on-One. Steve Adubato here at the Hyatt in New Brunswick. We are recognizing the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Community and Mental Health Act of 1963. President John F. Kennedy signed that law. It changed forever the way those who are dealing with behavioral mental health issues are being treated. One of the experts we're talking to today is Dr. Anthony DiFabio, President and Chief Executive Officer of an organization called Robin's Nest. Good to see you, Doctor. First, and then tell folks what Robin's Nest is.
Sure. So very good to see you, and thank you for taking the time to talk about this incredibly important topic. Robin's Nest is a children and family service agency. We provide over 50 programs and services throughout South Jersey, the southern 7 counties of Jersey, and they range everywhere from residential programs, supportive housing. We do a lot of child welfare programs, certainly to this topic, behavioral health, and also prevention services as well.
Doctor, if someone were to say, okay, back in '63, 50 years ago, President Kennedy signs the Community Mental Health Act. What is the connection between the signing of that law, the deinstitutionalizing, if you will, for those who are dealing with mental illness, trying to have them be more in the community, and the creation of an organization like Robin's Nest?
Absolutely. Quite honestly, if it wasn't for that act, there might not be a Robin's Nest.
How so?
Well, because it really was transformative. To your question's point, it ushered in a whole new way of understanding mental health and of treating mental health. And so before that, it was really seen as something that was very difficult to treat and really something that required hospitalization and even institutionalization. With the passage of that bill, we acknowledge that there's more we can, should, and must do within our communities, and it ushered in a whole new way of understanding mental health and certainly of treating mental health.
Give us an example, Doctor. So if someone says, okay, I'm logging on the Robin's Nest website, I want to find out what they do, and then they'll see all sorts of services, but give us a concrete example, a visceral, real example, human example of how you're helping children, families who are dealing with these issues in a way that people can say, oh, that's important.
Yeah. Well, there still is a legacy of fear, I think largely because of the history of mental health and mental health treatment. So when families a lot of times engage Robin's Nest, they're almost afraid of that hospital. And so what we talk about at Robin's Nest is we're about children and families, but we're not Disney World. If someone reaches out to us, they're at a crossroads in life we would not wish upon anyone. They're scared, they're worried, they feel they've lost control, they're powerless, they don't know what's going to happen. And in many instances, they're afraid that their child is going to be arrested or hospitalized. And we have the privilege of being able to talk to them and look them in the eye and say, I know you're scared, I know you're worried, but there's a lot of things that we can do. And what it's going to start with is you just coming in and having an outpatient appointment. And us.
What does that mean to folks? They may not understand exactly what that outpatient appointment means.
Well, what it means is you don't have to call 911. You don't have to go to the emergency room. You don't have to lock your door and wonder what's going to happen in another day, in another week. What it means is that you're talking to someone who their confidence and compassion on the phone is already giving them hope that healing is going to take place. And when we say, you know what, we'll have you come in a few days or in a week, and we sit down and talk to them about what's going on, and we help them to understand that this affects 1 out of every 4, 1 out of every 5 people. This is not something that you have to struggle with alone. And this is not something that we're just going to lock you guys away in a place like they would have done even 50 years ago. This is something that, we have treatment now where we can really work with you and your family and your child to get you to a much better place.
But Doctor, also at the same time, for those of us who in fact have dealt with mental health, behavioral health issues in our own families, there are times when there are crisis-related issues, and Robin's Nest does in fact have a crisis management plan. Talk about that.
Sure. So crisis for us, again, it's an opportunity to do something in a different...
Crisis is an opportunity?
Crisis is a tremendous opportunity, because crisis is where you have the benefit of an experience that you can immediately latch on with and engage that family with. And you can say, okay, so we're seeing evidence of what you're telling. If you tell us 2 weeks later, a month later, a year later, we're trying to understand it. But if we have staff who within 1 hour of that phone call are in your house with you and with your child, and we're engaging and talking and listening and seeing and hearing and experiencing it with you, we have an opportunity not only to de-escalate the situation, so you're not going to an emergency room, so you're not calling the police, but we have an opportunity to be able to put together an assessment based on that real-world observation of what was going on. And so we now are able to de-escalate, assess, and then put them up in services that have everything to do with getting them to a better path more quickly. So crisis is an opportunity.
I want to ask you something. We've talked to a whole range of people here. Again, we're here at the 50th anniversary. The folks at Perform Care and other sponsors of this event really got together, the advocates, the experts, the leaders in the behavioral mental health community to recognize the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Community Mental Health Act of 1963, signed by President John F. Kennedy. But a lot of the folks we've talked to who are, frankly, considerably older and more experienced than you are, talked about their commitment, their passion for this issue and the people you serve. Where does yours come from?
You know what, maybe I could tell you a story to make the point. So when I was at Vanderbilt University, I remember my first placement was in an inpatient unit. And it was my first day at that inpatient unit, and my supervisor came up and he said, okay, before we do anything else, I want to get a sense of your clinical skills. He said, look in that room. And you see that person right there? I want you to take the next few minutes to observe that person, and I want you to report to me on what your impressions are. I said, absolutely. So I'd studied my abnormal psych, I'd read the textbooks, I'm there, I'm observing. He comes back a few minutes later, like he said, and he says, so what do you think? I said, well, he's somewhat withdrawn and isolative, so he's not really socially engaged, he's sitting down, he's not moving that much, so he's not necessarily catatonic, but from a psychomotor perspective, he's pretty flat. He's really hyper-focused on this TV and not really engaging in eye contact or others. And I went through this. He says, okay, that's really great. Very, very good. You obviously know your diagnoses. What would you say he is? I said, well, I think he's a little internally preoccupied. I think he probably has maybe a schizophrenia, maybe a mood component to it. He said, okay, that's a staff person on break. And the message...
It was a staff person working on the team?
No, unbeknownst to him, he was just on break watching TV. The lesson for me was, if you don't have a system of care, we will apply our intellect and our experience to fit a person into whatever level of care we have. You will use that hammer to put in that thumbtack. So for me, while I wasn't alive for many years until after the passage of this,
in 63.
In 63.
Thanks for making the rest of us feel older. Go ahead.
Well, but it's still relevant, and you still see examples of it on a regular basis.
You love what you do, don't you?
I love what I do, absolutely. I'm very fortunate.
What about the people you serve? 1 minute left.
In many respects, I think that I learn more from the people we serve than anyone else out there. Their resilience, their strength of will and character, their humble willingness to look you in the eye and tell you some of the most vulnerable things about them and their families, their courage to address and work on and try and improve their own position and their family's position in life. I love going to work, I love going home. I'm very fortunate in life.
Thank you for the work you do, Doctor.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating 25 years of broadcast excellence. Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by the Russell Berry Foundation, Caldwell College, the Fidelco Group, Fedway Associates, New Jersey Sharing Network, Kessler Foundation, and by the Healthcare Foundation of New Jersey, founded by the Jewish community. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area. One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been produced in partnership with St. Joseph's Healthcare System.